The dust swirled across the parched Wyoming Territory as Hannah Turner stumbled forward, her arms trembling beneath the weight of a 50-pound sack of flour. The August sun of 1872 beat down mercilessly, scorching everything in its path, including Hannah's already sunburnt shoulders. She had walked nearly 2 miles from town, refusing the overpriced delivery service Mr. Hobson had tried to force upon her. Another step, she told herself. Just one more step, and then another. The ground beneath her feet seemed to shift and tilt. Hannah's vision blurred at the edges, dark spots dancing before her eyes. The weight of the flour grew impossibly heavier as her knees buckled. She tried to call out, but her parched throat produced nothing more than a faint whimper as consciousness slipped away like water through open fingers. Through the haze of her fading awareness, Hannah felt the burden lifted from her arms. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground. A deep voice rumbled above her, though she couldn't make out the words. The last thing she remembered was being cradled against a broad chest that smelled of leather and pine. "Rest, wife. I've got you both." Hannah's eyes fluttered open to find herself in unfamiliar surroundings. A rough-hewn ceiling came into focus above her, and she realized she was lying on a narrow bed covered with a patchwork quilt. Confused, she tried to sit up, only to be gently pressed back by a large, calloused hand. "Easy there," said the same deep voice she vaguely remembered from before. "You've been out for a spell." Hannah turned to see a tall man with broad shoulders standing beside the bed. His face was sun-bronzed and weathered, with piercing blue eyes that watched her with concern. A cowboy hat hung from a peg on the wall behind him. "Who are you?" Hannah managed, her voice raspy. "And why did you call me wife?" The man's expression shifted to one of confusion, then embarrassment. He reached for a cup of water on the bedside table and offered it to her. "Name's Owen Yates, and I apologize for any misunderstanding, madam." "You must have misheard me in your state," I said. "Rest tight, not rest, wife." He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture that seemed at odds with his otherwise confident demeanor. Hannah accepted the water, drinking deeply before responding. "I'm Hannah Turner." "Thank you for your help, Mr. Yates. I must have fainted carrying that sack of flour." "That you did. Found you about to collapse on the trail, carried you and your provisions back to my ranch. It's the closest shelter for miles." He gestured around the simple but clean cabin. "You shouldn't be carrying such heavy loads in this heat, Miss Turner." Hannah's pride flared. "I don't have much choice, Mr. Yates. There's no one else to do it." Owen nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Well, you're welcome to rest here until you're feeling steady again. I've put your flour in the kitchen, and there's stew on the stove if you're hungry." Hannah's stomach growled at the mention of food, and Owen's mouth quirked in a small smile. "I'll take that as a yes," he said, moving toward the door. "Take your time, I'll be outside tending to the horses." As he left, Hannah took stock of her situation. Her dress was dusty but otherwise intact, and her hair had been loosened from its tight bun, presumably to make her more comfortable. Despite the circumstances, she didn't feel frightened of the stranger who had helped her. There was something trustworthy about Owen Yates, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. After giving herself a moment to ensure she was steady, Hannah swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood carefully. She made her way to a small basin of water in the corner and splashed her face, trying to gather her composure. Through the window, she could see Owen in the corral, working with a spirited bay mare. His movements were sure and gentle, even as the horse pranced nervously around him. Hannah found herself watching longer than necessary, admiring the way he seemed to communicate with the animal without words. Finally, she turned away and went to the kitchen, where a pot of stew simmered over low heat. She helped herself to a small bowl, settling at the rough wooden table to eat. When Owen returned, he seemed pleased to see her up and about. "Feeling better?" he asked, washing his hands in a basin by the door. "Much, thank you. This stew is delicious. Not much of a cook, but I manage." He served himself a bowl and sat across from her. "If you don't mind my asking, do you live nearby, Miss Turner?" Hannah nodded. About 3 miles west of here. I have a small homestead my father's claim. He passed last winter. Owen's expression softened. I'm sorry to hear that. It's not easy working a homestead alone. No, it isn't, Hannah agreed, looking down at her stew. But it's mine now, and I intend to make it work. Admirable, Owen said, but perhaps impractical. Wyoming Territory isn't kind to lone women. Hannah bristled. I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Yates. Today was an exception. Owen held up his hands in surrender. I meant no offense. It's just concern speaking. He hesitated, then added, I lost my wife 2 years ago. Know something about being alone. The admission softened Hannah's defensiveness. I'm sorry for your loss. They ate in companionable silence for a moment before Owen spoke again. When you're ready, I'll hitch the wagon and take you home, and your flour. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose further. No imposition. Can't in good conscience let you walk 3 miles with that load. Besides, he added with a hint of a smile, my mother would haunt me from the grave if I didn't see a lady safely home. Hannah found herself returning his smile. Well, if it's to save you from being haunted, I accept. As promised, Owen hitched his wagon after their meal. He helped Hannah up onto the seat with a gentle hand at her elbow, then loaded the sack of flour in the back. The ride to her homestead was filled with easy conversation. Owen told her about his small cattle operation, and Hannah shared stories of her father and their move west from Pennsylvania 5 years earlier. There it is, Hannah said, pointing to a modest cabin set against a backdrop of cottonwood trees. A small creek ran nearby, and a fenced garden patch showed signs of careful tending. It's not much, but it's home. Owen studied the property with an appraising eye. Good water source, solid cabin, your father chose well. He guided the wagon to a stop in front of the cabin and jumped down, coming around to help Hannah descend. His hands at her waist were strong and sure, and Hannah felt a strange flutter in her chest as he set her on the ground. Thank you for everything, Mr. Yates, she said, stepping back quickly. Owen, please, he replied, retrieving the flour sack from the wagon bed. And it was no trouble. Where would you like this? Hannah led him inside, where he deposited the flour in her small pantry. She offered him coffee, which he accepted with a grateful nod. As she busied herself at the stove, Owen wandered around the cabin, noting the neat organization and homey touches: dried flowers in a jar, a quilt draped over a rocking chair, a shelf of well-worn books. You've made this place your own, he commented, running a finger along the spine of a leather-bound volume. It helps me feel less alone, Hannah admitted, bringing 2 steaming cups to the table. The books were my mother's. She taught me to read before she passed. A valuable gift, Owen said, accepting the coffee. My own mother did the same for me. Not many cowboys can claim literacy as a skill. Hannah smiled. You don't strike me as an ordinary cowboy, Mr. Yates Owen. No, what kind do I strike you as then? His blue eyes held genuine curiosity. Hannah considered him for a moment. The kind who notices things, who thinks before he acts, who helps strangers without expectation of reward. A faint flush colored Owen's cheeks. You give me too much credit, Miss Turner. Hannah, she corrected, and I don't think I do. As they sipped their coffee, Owen inquired about her homestead, what crops she grew, how many animals she kept, what repairs the cabin needed. Hannah found herself sharing more than she intended, including her struggles with the well pump and a leaky roof corner. I could take a look at that pump before I go, Owen offered, and the roof wouldn't take much to fix. Hannah started to protest, but Owen waved her off. Consider it neighborly duty. We're sparse enough out here that we have to look after one another. Unable to argue with his logic, and secretly relieved at the prospect of help, Hannah agreed. They spent the remainder of the afternoon working side by side. Owen fixed the pump with minimal effort, then climbed onto the roof to replace some damaged shingles while Hannah handed up materials from below. By the time the sun began to set, Owen had completed several small repairs that would have taken Hannah days to figure out on her own. She insisted he stay for dinner, a simple but hearty meal of beans, cornbread, and the last of her preserved peaches. "This is the best meal I've had in months," Owen declared, accepting a second helping of cornbread. "My cooking doesn't extend much beyond stew and coffee." "Well, you're welcome to dinner anytime you're in the area," Hannah said, then immediately flushed at how forward that sounded. "I mean, as thanks for your help today." Owen's eyes crinkled at the corners. "I might just take you up on that offer, Hannah Turner." Good food and good company are rare commodities in these parts. As twilight deepened, Owen reluctantly rose to leave. "I should get back before full dark. The trail can be treacherous at night." Hannah walked him to the door, suddenly aware of how quiet the cabin would be once he left. "Thank you again for everything. I'm not sure what would have happened if you hadn't come along when you did." "I'm glad I was there," Owen said softly. He hesitated at the threshold, then reached out to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. The touch was brief, but sent warmth cascading through Hannah's body. "Take care of yourself, Hannah, and remember, neighbors help each other. Don't be too proud to ask." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and strode to his wagon. Hannah watched until the vehicle disappeared into the growing darkness, her fingertips unconsciously touching the spot where his hand had been. Over the next few weeks, Owen made a habit of stopping by Hannah's homestead. Sometimes he brought small gifts, a mended harness for her mule, seeds for her garden, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy. Other times, he simply appeared to help with chores that required strength Hannah didn't possess, like replacing fence posts or moving heavy furniture. Hannah found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. She hadn't expected to feel this way about anyone, certainly not a man she barely knew. Yet with each conversation, each shared meal, each moment of companionable silence, she learned more about Owen Yates and liked what she discovered. He was educated, having attended school in St. Louis before the war. He had fought for the Union, though he spoke little of those years. He had a dry wit that emerged when he was comfortable, and a gentleness that extended to all living creatures. Most importantly, he treated Hannah as an equal, respecting her decisions about her land and life, offering help without insisting, valuing her opinions and ideas. One crisp October afternoon, Owen arrived with 2 baskets of apples from his small orchard. "Thought you might like to put these up for winter," he explained, setting them on her porch. "They're good for preserves." Hannah smiled, running her hand over the smooth, red fruit. "They're beautiful, Owen. Would you like to stay and help me start the preserving? I could use an extra pair of hands for peeling." Owen removed his hat, revealing hair the color of wheat that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "I'd be honored, though I warn you, my knife skills are better suited to whittling than kitchen work." They spent the afternoon in Hannah's kitchen, peeling and slicing apples, preparing jars, and stirring the sweet-smelling mixture as it bubbled on the stove. Owen proved to be a quick study, and Hannah found herself laughing more than she had in years at his stories and observations. As they worked, their hands occasionally brushed, sending jolts of awareness through Hannah each time. She noticed Owen watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, his blue eyes warm with something more than friendship. The realization that he might feel the same growing attraction both thrilled and terrified her. When the last jar was sealed and cooling, Hannah wiped her hands on her apron and turned to find Owen standing closer than she expected. The kitchen suddenly seemed very small, the air between them charged with unspoken thoughts. "Hannah," Owen began, his voice lower than usual. "I've been meaning to ask you something." Hannah's heart pounded in her chest. "Yes, the harvest dance in town next Saturday. Would you consider attending with me?" His usual confidence seemed to falter slightly as he waited for her answer. Relief and disappointment mingled in Hannah's chest, relief that his question was innocent, disappointment for the same reason. "I'd like that very much," she said, managing a smile. Owen's face brightened. "Truly, I wasn't sure if you'd want to be seen with me in such a public way." "Why wouldn't I?" Hannah asked, genuinely puzzled. Owen shrugged, a gesture that made him seem younger somehow. Some might think it improper, you being alone out here and me visiting so often. I wouldn't want to damage your reputation. Hannah hadn't considered how their friendship might appear to others, isolated as they were from town gossip. I don't much care what people think, she said firmly. You've been a good friend to me, Owen. I'd be proud to attend the dance with you. Something flickered in Owen's eyes at the word friend, but he nodded. I'll come by at 6 then. Wear something pretty, though you'd look beautiful in sackcloth. The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, brought heat to Hannah's cheeks. Before she could respond, Owen had donned his hat and was heading for the door. I should get back. Got cattle to check before dark. Hannah followed him onto the porch, hugging herself against the autumn chill. Thank you for the apples, and for your help today. Owen paused at the steps, looking back at her with an expression that made her breath catch. Thank you for making this place feel like somewhere I want to be, Hannah Turner. With that, he was gone, leaving Hannah to wonder if she had imagined the deeper meaning behind his words. The night of the harvest dance arrived clear and cool, with a full moon illuminating the countryside. Hannah had spent the day in nervous preparation, washing her hair with rosemary water and pressing her best dress, a blue calico that her father had always said matched her eyes. She'd even unpacked her mother's silver combs to secure her hair in a style more elaborate than her usual practical bun. As the grandfather clock in the corner struck 6, Hannah heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. She smoothed her skirts one last time and opened the door to find Owen dismounting from his horse, dressed in clean denims, a pressed white shirt, and a dark vest. His hat was newer than the one he usually wore, and he'd trimmed his beard. When he looked up and saw her standing in the doorway, he stopped mid-motion, his expression one of undisguised admiration. Hannah, he breathed, approaching the porch. You're a vision. Hannah felt a blush rise to her cheeks. You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Yates. Owen smiled, extending his hand to help her down the steps. I brought something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small posy of late-blooming wildflowers tied with a blue ribbon. I know it's not much, but it's perfect, Hannah interrupted, genuinely touched. She accepted the simple bouquet, inhaling the sweet fragrance. Thank you, Owen. He helped her mount the second horse. He'd brought a gentle mare with a white blaze down her nose, then swung up onto his own mount. The ride to town was filled with easy conversation, though Hannah could sense a tension in Owen that hadn't been there before. The town hall was decorated with autumn leaves, pumpkins, and golden bunting. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the gathering crowd. A small band played lively tunes in the corner, and tables laden with food and drink lined one wall. As Owen helped Hannah dismount, she noticed several curious glances directed their way. She recognized Mrs. Hobson, the general store owner's wife, whispering behind her hand to another woman. The town's schoolteacher, Miss Winters, offered a friendly wave, while the blacksmith, Mr. Donovan, nodded respectfully to Owen. It appears we're causing quite a stir, Hannah murmured as Owen escorted her inside, his hand warm at the small of her back. Let them talk, Owen replied, his voice low near her ear. I'm in the company of the loveliest woman in the territory. They're just jealous. The compliment warmed Hannah from within, and she found herself standing a little straighter as they entered the hall. Owen secured them cups of punch and introduced Hannah to several people she hadn't met during her infrequent trips to town. Everyone was polite, if curious, and Hannah gradually relaxed as the evening progressed. When the band struck up a waltz, Owen set down their cups and extended his hand. May I have this dance, Miss Turner? Hannah hesitated. I should warn you, I'm not very practiced. It's been years since I danced. I'll lead, Owen promised. Just follow me. As he guided her onto the dance floor, Hannah felt a moment of panic. But then Owen's arm encircled her waist, his other hand clasping hers firmly, and suddenly they were moving in perfect time to the music. He was an excellent dancer, guiding her with subtle pressure and confident steps until Hannah felt as though they were floating. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked, amazed at how easily they moved together. Owen smiled down at her, his eyes reflecting the lantern light. "My mother insisted I learn proper social graces, said no woman would have me otherwise." "Your mother was a wise woman," Hannah said, returning his smile. "She would have liked you," Owen replied softly. "Very much." The simple statement held such weight that Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away, focusing instead on the sensation of being in Owen's arms, of moving as one across the polished floor. They danced several more times throughout the evening, stopping occasionally for refreshments or conversation with others. Hannah met Owen's ranch hand, a grizzled older man named Jasper, who regarded her with open curiosity before declaring, "About time the boss found himself some pleasant company." As the night drew to a close, Owen suggested they step outside for some air. The town square was quiet, most residents either inside the dance or already home for the evening. Owen led Hannah to a bench beneath a large oak tree, its leaves rustling gently in the night breeze. "Are you enjoying yourself?" he asked, his shoulder touching hers as they sat side by side. "More than I expected," Hannah admitted. "It's been a lovely evening, Owen. Thank you for asking me." Owen turned slightly to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Hannah, there's something I need to say, something I've been thinking about for weeks now." Hannah's heart began to race. "Yes. When I found you that day on the trail, I thought you were the most stubborn, independent woman I'd ever encountered, trying to carry that flower all by yourself." His lips curved in a fond smile. "And then I got to know you, and I realized you're also the strongest, kindest, most remarkable person I've ever met." Hannah sat very still, afraid to break whatever spell had fallen over them. "I know it hasn't been long," Owen continued, "but I find myself thinking about you all the time. Wondering how your day is going, if you're safe, if you're smiling. I make up excuses to visit your homestead just to see your face." He took a deep breath. "What I'm trying to say, not very well, is that I care for you, Hannah, deeply, more than I thought possible after losing Eliza." The mention of his late wife hung in the air between them. Hannah reached out and took his hand. "Owen, I care for you too, but I don't want to be a replacement for someone you've lost." Owen shook his head firmly. "You could never be that. You're entirely different women." "What I felt for Eliza was real, but it's in the past. What I feel for you it's like coming home to a place I didn't know existed." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, I just needed you to know." Hannah looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, along with something that made her heart skip a beat. Slowly, giving him every chance to pull away, she leaned forward until their lips met in a gentle kiss. It was brief, chaste even, but when Hannah pulled back, Owen looked thunderstruck. "Hannah," he whispered, reaching up to cup her cheek with his free hand. "I'm not very good with words," she said softly, "but I hope that tells you what I feel." Owen's smile was radiant. "It's a start," he murmured, leaning in to kiss her again, more deeply this time. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Hannah knew with certainty that her life had changed irrevocably. The future stretched before her, not as a lonely struggle, but as something bright with possibility. The ride back to Hannah's homestead was quieter than the journey to town, but the silence was comfortable, filled with shared glances and occasional touches as they rode side by side. When they reached her cabin, Owen helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. "I should go," he said reluctantly, though he made no move to leave. Hannah nodded, equally reluctant to see the evening end. "When will I see you again?" "Tomorrow," Owen suggested, hope evident in his voice. "I could bring Sunday dinner, spare you cooking for once." Hannah smiled. "I'd like that, but fair warning I'll expect more than stew." Owen laughed, the sound rich in the night air. "I'll see what I can manage." He grew serious again, reaching up to touch her cheek. "Thank you for tonight, Hannah, for everything." Hannah leaned into his touch. "Thank you for finding me that day, Owen Yates." He kissed her once more, sweetly, before mounting his horse and leading the mare away. Hannah watched until he disappeared into the darkness, her heart fuller than it had been in years. True to his word, Owen appeared the next day with a basket containing a surprisingly elaborate meal: roast chicken, potatoes, carrots, and even an apple pie that he admitted sheepishly had been purchased from Mrs. Peterson at the town bakery. They settled into a routine over the following weeks. Owen would ride over several times a week, helping with chores or repairs, staying for meals, sometimes just sitting with Hannah on the porch as dusk fell, talking about everything and nothing. As autumn deepened toward winter, their feelings for each other grew stronger. Hannah found herself thinking of Owen constantly when they were apart, anticipating his visits with an eagerness that both delighted and frightened her. She hadn't expected to find love again, hadn't been looking for it, yet here it was, as natural and necessary as breathing. One November evening, as the first snow of the season dusted the ground, Owen arrived with more than his usual provisions. After helping Hannah prepare dinner, he led her to the rocking chair by the fire and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Hannah," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "these past months have been the happiest of my life. Every day I spend with you confirms what I've known since that first day, that you are the woman I want to share my life with." Hannah's breath caught in her throat as Owen reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. From it, he produced a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained, holding it up so the firelight caught the luminous stone. "She made me promise to give it only to a woman as strong and good-hearted as she was." His blue eyes met Hannah's, filled with love and hope. "I can think of no one who embodies those qualities more than you." Hannah felt tears spill down her cheeks as Owen continued. "Hannah Turner, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Of joining our lives and lands, of building a future together?" For a moment, Hannah couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Then she slid from the chair to kneel beside Owen, cupping his beloved face in her hands. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Owen Yates, I will marry you." Joy transformed Owen's features as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if meant for her all along. He gathered her into his arms, kissing her with such tenderness that fresh tears sprang to Hannah's eyes. "I promise to cherish you all my days," he murmured against her lips. "To be your partner in all things, to share your burdens and your joys." "And I promise the same," Hannah replied, her heart overflowing. "To stand beside you through whatever life brings, to make a home with you wherever we may be." They remained by the fire long into the night, planning their future together. They would combine their properties, Owen's cattle ranch and Hannah's homestead, creating something bigger and better than either had alone. They would marry in the spring, when the land renewed itself and wildflowers bloomed across the prairie. The winter months passed in a flurry of preparations. Owen spent most days at Hannah's cabin, returning to his ranch only when necessary to tend his cattle. They worked side by side to prepare both properties for their joined future, expanding Hannah's garden, reinforcing fences, adding a room to Owen's ranch house, where they decided to make their primary home. Word of their engagement spread quickly through the small community. Most offered congratulations, though Hannah noticed Mrs. Hobson's pinched expression when they announced their news in the general store. "Rather sudden, isn't it?" the older woman had commented, eyeing Hannah speculatively. Owen had simply smiled, his arm secure around Hannah's waist. "When you find the right person, Mrs. Hobson, you don't waste time." As winter gave way to spring, wedding preparations intensified. Hannah sewed a new dress of cream-colored cotton, embroidered with tiny forget-me-nots along the bodice. Owen ordered a suit from back east, grumbling good-naturedly about the discomfort of formal wear, but determined to look his best for their special day. They decided on a simple ceremony at Owen's ranch, soon to be their ranch, with the few friends they had in the territory. Reverend Simmons would officiate, and Mrs. Peterson agreed to bake a wedding cake as her gift to the couple. The week before the wedding, disaster struck. A late spring storm swept across the territory, bringing freezing rain that coated everything in a layer of ice. Owen had gone to town for final wedding supplies, leaving Hannah at the homestead to pack the last of her belongings for the move to the ranch. As the storm worsened, Hannah grew increasingly worried. The roads would be treacherous, visibility poor. She paced the cabin, peering out the window every few minutes, searching for any sign of Owen's return. When the grandfather clock struck midnight with still no sign of him, Hannah made a decision. Dressing in her warmest clothes and wrapping a heavy shawl around her shoulders, she set out toward town. The icy rain stung her face as she trudged through the darkness, calling Owen's name. She had gone perhaps a mile when she heard a faint response. Following the sound, she found Owen's wagon overturned in a ditch, one wheel shattered. Owen himself was pinned beneath it, conscious but unable to free himself. "Hannah," he cried when he saw her, relief and dismay mingling in his voice. "What are you doing out in this? It's too dangerous." "Did you really think I'd stay safe and warm while you were missing?" Hannah replied, already assessing the situation. "How badly are you hurt?" "Not too bad, I think," Owen said, though his face was pale with pain. "My leg is trapped, but I don't think it's broken." The wagon shifted when I tried to free the wheel from the mud. Hannah worked quickly, using a fallen branch as a lever to lift the wagon just enough for Owen to pull free. He grimaced as he moved, but managed to stand, leaning heavily on Hannah for support. "We need to get you warm," Hannah said, noting how his clothes were soaked through. "Can you walk?" "With your help," Owen said, his arm around her shoulders. "I'm sorry, Hannah. I should have stayed in town when the storm hit, and missed the chance to be rescued by your future wife." Hannah teased, trying to keep his spirits up as they slowly made their way back to the cabin. What kind of story would that make for our grandchildren? Despite the gravity of their situation, Owen chuckled. A less dramatic one, certainly. By the time they reached the cabin, both were exhausted and chilled to the bone. Hannah helped Owen onto the bed, then quickly built up the fire and put water on to boil. She helped him out of his wet clothes, wincing at the large bruise forming on his right thigh. "It looks worse than it feels," Owen assured her, though Hannah wasn't convinced. She cleaned and bandaged a few cuts on his hands and face, then wrapped him in every blanket she owned. Once he was settled with hot tea laced with whiskey, Hannah changed into dry clothes herself and climbed onto the bed beside him, adding her body heat to warm him faster. "You shouldn't have come looking for me," Owen murmured, his arm drawing her close. "You could have been hurt." Hannah rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I will always come looking for you, Owen Yates, just as you found me when I needed you most." Owen pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We make quite a pair, don't we?" "Indeed we do," Hannah agreed, snuggling closer. The perfect match. The storm delayed their wedding by a week, giving Owen time to recover from his injuries. When the day finally arrived, it dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself approved of their union. Hannah stood before the small mirror in what had been Owen's bedroom, now their bedroom, adjusting the flowers in her hair. Her cream-colored dress fit perfectly, the embroidered forget-me-nots catching the sunlight streaming through the window. A knock at the door preceded Jasper's weathered face peering in. The old ranch hand had taken it upon himself to stand in for Hannah's father, offering to escort her to the makeshift altar in the front yard. "You look mighty pretty, Miss Hannah," he said, his usual gruff manner softened by genuine affection. "The boss is one lucky man." Hannah smiled, touched by the compliment. "Thank you, Jasper, for everything you've done to help us prepare." Jasper waved away her thanks. "Been with Owen since he started this place. Never seen him as happy as he's been since he found you. Makes an old man's heart glad to see it." He offered his arm, and Hannah took it, her heart pounding with anticipation. As they stepped onto the porch, she could see the small gathering of guests in the yard. Reverend Simmons stood beneath an arch of spring flowers, and beside him, Owen waited, resplendent in his new suit, his face alight with joy when he caught sight of her. The simple ceremony passed in a blur for Hannah. She was aware only of Owen's hands holding hers, of his voice steady and sure as he recited his vows, of the love shining in his eyes as he slipped a gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Simmons declared. "Mr. Yates, you may kiss your bride." Owen gathered Hannah close, his kiss tender yet filled with promise. The small crowd applauded, and when they parted, Hannah saw tears in Owen's eyes that matched her own. "Mrs. Yates," he whispered, the name a caress. Hannah's heart swelled with happiness. "My husband," she replied, the words feeling right in a way she hadn't expected. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful. Mrs. Peterson's cake was a triumph of sugar and butter, decorated with candied violets. There was dancing to the music of a fiddle and harmonica, played by two of Owen's neighboring ranchers. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the land they now shared, Owen led Hannah away from the festivities to a quiet spot beneath an old cottonwood tree. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Beyond words," Hannah replied, reaching up to trace the beloved contours of his face. "I never imagined I could feel this way." Owen captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "When I found you that day, fainting with that sack of flour, I had no idea my life was about to change forever. I just saw a woman who needed help, who was too stubborn to ask for it." Hannah laughed softly. "And I saw a presumptuous cowboy who thought he knew better than I did." "I did know better," Owen teased, earning a playful swat from his new wife. "Perhaps in that one instance," Hannah conceded. "But only that once." Owen's expression grew serious. "I meant what I said when I lifted you both that day. Rest, wife, I've got you." Hannah stilled, confusion crossing her features. "I thought you said you told me rest tight, not rest, wife." Owen's lips curved in a sheepish smile. "I may have misrepresented that slightly. The truth is, when I saw you, something inside me just knew. It was presumptuous and probably inappropriate, but in that moment, looking down at you in my arms, the word wife just slipped out." Hannah's eyes widened. "You knew even then." "Not consciously," Owen admitted. "But something in my heart recognized you, Hannah, as if I'd been waiting for you without realizing it." Tears pricked Hannah's eyes at the simple, heartfelt confession. "And now here we are." "Here we are," Owen agreed, drawing her closer. "Husband and wife, just as I somehow knew we would be." As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, Hannah laid her head against Owen's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The future stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. Together, they would build something lasting on this wild, beautiful land, a home, a family, a legacy of love that had begun with a chance meeting on a dusty trail. "Rest, wife," Owen whispered, echoing those first words. "I've got you now and always." Hannah closed her eyes, safe in the circle of her husband's arms. "And I've got you," she replied. "Now and always." Spring gave way to summer, and Hannah and Owen fell into the rhythm of married life with surprising ease. They divided the work of the combined properties according to their strengths, Owen handling the cattle and heavy labor, Hannah managing the household, garden, and accounts. Together, they made decisions about crops, improvements, and investments, their different perspectives complementing each other perfectly. Word of their successful partnership spread throughout the territory. Other ranchers began to consult Owen about his innovative breeding methods, while women from neighboring homesteads sought Hannah's advice on preserving and gardening. Their ranch became a gathering place of sorts, hosting Sunday dinners and occasional dances in the barn they had expanded that summer. As autumn approached, Hannah began to suspect a new blessing was on its way. She kept her suspicions to herself for several weeks, wanting to be certain before sharing the news with Owen. But as her symptoms became more pronounced, morning sickness, fatigue, a distinctive softening of her waistline, she knew she couldn't keep her secret much longer. One evening in late September, after a long day of harvesting the kitchen garden, Hannah prepared a special dinner, all of Owen's favorites. including apple pie made with fruit from their orchard. She set the table with the good china they had received as a wedding gift, and even placed a small bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers in the center. Owen raised an eyebrow when he came in from the barn, noting the elaborate preparations. "What's the occasion?" he asked, washing up at the basin by the door. Hannah smiled mysteriously. "Can't a wife prepare a nice meal for her husband without a reason?" "She can," Owen agreed, coming to drop a kiss on her forehead. "But that particular smile tells me you're up to something, Mrs. Yates." Hannah laughed, shooing him toward the table. "Sit down and eat while it's hot. All will be revealed in due time." They enjoyed their meal, discussing the day's work and plans for winterizing the barn. As Hannah served the pie, she took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Owen," she began, her voice suddenly shy. "Do you remember when we talked about expanding our family?" Owen nodded, a forkful of pie halfway to his mouth. "Of course. We agreed we'd like children when the time was right." His fork lowered slowly as comprehension dawned on his face. "Hannah, are you saying?" Hannah nodded, tears of joy springing to her eyes. "Yes, we're going to have a baby, Owen, in early spring, I think." Owen's reaction was everything Hannah could have hoped for. He was on his feet in an instant, circling the table to pull her into his arms. "A baby," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Our baby." He knelt before her chair, placing a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Are you feeling well? Is there anything you need? Should we send for the doctor in Cheyenne?" Hannah laughed through her happy tears, covering his hand with her own. "I'm fine, Owen. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, often in far more challenging circumstances than ours." "But not my wife carrying my child," Owen replied, his blue eyes serious. "I want everything to be perfect for you both." Hannah leaned down to kiss him softly. "It already is perfect because we're together." Owen insisted on making modifications to their home in preparation for the baby, adding a nursery adjacent to their bedroom, improving the heating system to ensure the house stayed warm through the Wyoming winter, even building a rocking cradle from cherry, what he had specially ordered from back east. Hannah sewed tiny garments in the evenings, her heart swelling with love each time she felt the baby move within her. Owen took to talking to her growing belly, telling the child stories about the ranch and making grand promises about teaching him or her to ride and rope. "What if it's a girl?" Hannah asked one night as they lay in bed, Owen's hand resting protectively over her rounded abdomen. "Then she'll be the best horseman in the territory," Owen replied without hesitation, "just like her mother." Hannah smiled in the darkness. "I'm hardly the best horseman in the territory." "You are to me," Owen said, kissing her shoulder. "I've never seen anyone with a gentler touch or better instincts with animals. Our daughter would be fortunate to inherit your talents." As Hannah's pregnancy progressed, Owen became increasingly protective, taking on more of her usual chores despite her protests that she was perfectly capable. Their good-natured bickering about her limitations became a daily ritual, with Owen usually prevailing through sheer stubbornness. "You're the most infuriating man I've ever known," Hannah declared one December afternoon when Owen refused to let her help unload supplies from town. "And you're the most stubborn woman," Owen countered, easily lifting a heavy sack of flour that Hannah had reached for. "Remember what happened the last time you tried to carry one of these? You fainted, and I had to rescue you." Hannah couldn't help but laugh at the memory. "That turned out rather well for both of us, as I recall." Owen's expression softened as he set down the flour and pulled her into his arms. "The best day of my life, finding you on that trail. But now I have two of you to protect, so please, Hannah, let me do the heavy lifting for a while." How could she argue with such sweet concern? Hannah conceded, allowing Owen to fuss over her in ways she would have found stifling from anyone else. His care came from such a place of love that she found it endearing rather than restrictive. As winter settled over the ranch, bringing snow and bitter cold, they spent peaceful evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other and making plans for their growing family. They decided on names: William, after Owen's father, if the baby was a boy; Elizabeth, after Hannah's mother, if it was a girl. "I can't wait to meet this little one," Owen said one night, his hand gentle on Hannah's now prominent belly. As if in response, the baby kicked vigorously, causing Owen's eyes to widen in delight. "Did you feel that? He's strong." Hannah corrected with a smile. "And yes, she's been practicing her kicking all day." "Boy or girl, this child is already loved beyond measure," Owen said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like his or her mother." The baby arrived on a clear, cold February morning after a long night of labor. Mrs. Donovan, the blacksmith's wife who had assisted at many births in the territory, helped deliver a healthy, robust daughter with a shock of dark hair and eyes as blue as her father's. When Owen was finally allowed into the bedroom, his face pale with worry after hours of pacing, Hannah was propped up on pillows, cradling their tiny daughter in her arms. The look of wonder that transformed his features as he gazed at them would stay with Hannah for the rest of her life. "Elizabeth," Hannah said softly, offering the swaddled infant to her father. "Meet your papa." Owen took the baby with hands that trembled slightly, cradling her as if she were made of the finest porcelain. "She's perfect," he whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "So tiny, yet so perfect." "She has your eyes," Hannah observed, her own eyes heavy with exhaustion but bright with joy. "And your strength," Owen replied, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "Thank you, Hannah, for our daughter, for our life together, for everything." Hannah reached out to touch his face, wiping away a tear with her thumb. "Thank you for finding me that day, Owen, for lifting both me and that ridiculous sack of flour when I was too stubborn to admit I needed help." Owen smiled, remembering. "I believe I told you to rest." "You called me wife," Hannah reminded him, "before you even knew my name." "The heart knows what it wants," Owen said simply, bending to place a gentle kiss on their daughter's forehead, then a longer one on Hannah's lips. "And mine wanted you from the first moment I saw you." As spring returned to the Wyoming Territory, the Yates Ranch flourished. Little Elizabeth, already nicknamed Libby by her adoring father, grew rapidly, her curious eyes taking in the world around her with an intelligence that made both parents proud. The three of them settled into a new routine, with Hannah balancing motherhood and her responsibilities to the ranch, and Owen working tirelessly to provide for his growing family. They faced challenges: a late frost that damaged the apple blossoms, a wolf that preyed on their calves, the usual unpredictability of life on the frontier, but they faced them together, their partnership strengthening with each obstacle overcome. 1 year to the day after their wedding, Owen surprised Hannah with a gift: a small silver locket containing a tiny portrait of the three of them, painted by an itinerant artist who had passed through the territory that spring. "So you can always keep us close to your heart," he explained as he fastened it around her neck. Hannah touched the locket, then reached up to draw her husband down for a kiss. "You're already there," she whispered against his lips. "You and Libby, always." As the years passed, the Yates family grew. Libby was joined by a brother, William, 2 years later, and eventually by another sister, Rose. The ranch expanded as well, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. Owen's innovative breeding methods and Hannah's careful management of their resources created a legacy that would sustain their family for generations to come. Through it all, the joys and sorrows, triumphs and setbacks that make up a life well lived, Hannah and Owen remained steadfast in their devotion to each other. Their love, born in an unexpected moment on a dusty trail, only deepened with time. On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of the home they had built together, watching their children and grandchildren play in the yard, Owen took Hannah's hand, his touch as tender as it had been on their wedding day. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if I hadn't come along when I did that day?" he asked, his voice reflective. "If you hadn't fainted with that sack of flour?" Hannah smiled, the lines at the corners of her eyes speaking of years of laughter and sunlight. "I believe we would have found each other somehow, Owen Yates. Some things are simply meant to be." Owen brought her hand to his lips, kissing the gold band that had never left her finger in all their years together. "I think you're right, Hannah Yates. Some things are written in the stars long before we recognize them." As the sun set over the land they had tamed and nurtured together, casting golden light across the home they had created through love and partnership, Hannah rested her head on her husband's shoulder, content in the knowledge that their story, beginning with a chance encounter between a stubborn woman and a kind-hearted cowboy, had unfolded exactly as it was meant to. "Rest, wife," Owen murmured, echoing words spoken 2 decades earlier as his arm tightened around her. "I've still got you, and I've got you," Hannah replied, her heart as full of love as it had been on the day she first admitted her feelings for the man beside her. Now and always. In the fading light of day, surrounded by the fruits of their shared life, Hannah and Owen Yates sat together. Their love a testament to the power of finding the right person at the right moment, even if that moment involved fainting with a sack of flour on a dusty Wyoming trail.